Sweet Caroline, bum bum bum, good times never felt so good. And then the song goes on, touching me, touching you. Now that's not going to win me an Oscar, but I have to tell you something. More and more we are realizing the importance of touch, the power of touch, and how it affects our lives, our health, and our well-being. Gentle touch has the power to increase your immunity. It has the power to lower your blood pressure, decrease your stress levels, and perhaps have an effect on your longevity. Touch today is becoming more and more relevant. In today's world, in terms of the pandemic that we lived through, or in some ways still living through, the effects are apparent. Where previously we'd be greeting with a handshake, we'd be having a hug, we'd be perhaps stroking someone's child on the head, or even as we greet each other, patting each other on the back. A lot of these behaviors have been reduced. Now we're at the point where we're going, and does it make a difference? The answer is yes. Science has now come up with the reasons, the mechanisms why this happens. Somebody comes along and they taps you on the shoulder, or they perhaps slap your face, perhaps rub your hair if you have any hair, and straight away your brain has to figure out, was that a friendly gesture? Was that a threatening gesture? Should I back away? Should I run? Should I react with increasing my stress levels? Or should I bring myself back down to a calm level? So the touch straight away has to be discriminated from a negative to a perceived positive. Pain fibers, which are activated straight away, which sense things like pressure, which sense things like temperature, work in a way that is very, very different to gentle touch. Gentle touch fibers, so somebody comes along and they does that, takes probably 1 to 2 seconds to get from your arm to a part of your brain that tells you it is okay, it is safe. On the other hand, the hard punch, the rigorous rub, all of these things work within milliseconds. The nerve fibers that transmit the information from this part to your brain works within milliseconds. It is much faster than the other nerve fibers. And this is really important, because the first bit for all of us is a survival mechanism. It's a mechanism in which you're saying, well, I need to figure out very, very quickly what is my reaction going to be. So the survival kicks in straight away. The calming, soothing, relaxing effect, in some ways similar to your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system, is slower. So it shoots up straight away and it comes down very, very slowly. The calming down, the coming down very slowly, is where these specialized nerve fibers called Tactile Afferents come in. Tactile Afferents are very, very specialized in the way that they respond. So they respond to gentle, i.e. low pressure. They respond to slow, rhythmical movements. So if someone was to come along and to apply a lot of pressure, or alternatively they do something that goes at a much faster rate, it creates a different effect within our brains. It may still act in the same way of lowering cortisol. It may, to some extent, lower your heart rate. But the effect of doing a gentle touch is different from the firm pressure that can be applied. When we look at it and think, well, where are these fibers that we talk about? Scientists have found that a lot of the fibers for that appear on the forearms. Funnily enough, they also appear on the backs of your shoulders. So when you think in terms of hugs, when you think in terms of perhaps sitting with somebody who is upset, who is sorrowful, who's feeling sad, you would either tend to receive a hug or a rub on the shoulder, or someone stroking the back of your arms. At birth, babies have very, very poor eyesight. They can't see very clearly. They can't hear very clearly. But what they can do is distinguish touch. Touch actually starts from within the womb. But at birth, we are able to see now that touch stabilizes blood pressure of the baby. It stabilizes the temperature, and it also affects the breathing pattern of the newborn. As we develop, the other senses pick up more and more importance, because touch, if you think about it, has to do with closeness. It has to do with skin to skin, or it has to do with people who stand or are in the same place in close proximity. As you get older, eyesight becomes more important, because you don't need the touch of somebody who's just punched you. You need to see the car that's coming towards you from 100 meters away. You need to be able to hear the sound of a roaring lion as it starts to come in your direction. So developmentally, touch has become less and less important as we need to see further and further away from where we are. Living in a world where the ability to touch, or the availability of touch, becomes less, causes greater stress. And so when we are stressed from whatever reason, and there's an absence or a shortage of touch, the tendency is that we all need some sort of relief. We all need some sort of comfort. So simultaneously as the availability of touch goes down, you find that people reach towards alcohol, people reach towards drugs, or people tend to reach towards behaviors that attempt to bring comfort. Biochemically, what touch does is it causes within the brain a release of hormones. It causes a release of oxytocin. It causes a release of endorphins. It also decreases via your vagus nerve the amount of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So touch in terms of oxytocin is something that's really important. Oxytocin is the hormone which is called the community or the bonding hormone. A rise in oxytocin levels is what makes a hug feel good. Have you ever noticed when you watch kids who have fallen over and they're crying, and a parent comes over and he gives them a hug, and they may say soothing words like, "Oh, it's all right," and all the rest of it, and eventually the child stops crying. What that has to do with is the amount of oxytocin that's released from within the child. The child's brain releases oxytocin, which acts to soothe. It's that soothing part where we are now finding that the choice between, not that there should be a choice, but if one were to give a hug versus one were to give soothing words without the hugs make much more difference than the words. For couples, they've found that oxytocin helps the bonding process. Oxytocin helps with less stress within couples. It helps couples live longer. And even to the point, in fact, where researchers are now discovering that couples in which there are high levels of oxytocin, the ability to learn goes on further. In a digitally driven world, the gap between people has gone exponentially wider. So there's still the face-to-face or the screen-to-screen, but the barriers, the touch barriers, has gone greater. So for people who experience loneliness or depression, one of the difficulties that I hear is that they say, well, you don't understand my history. My history is one of maybe abuse. My history is one of where places I've been in that people shout at you or people hit you. Those sort of situations leave you scarred. They leave you isolated. They leave you in a place where the level of oxytocin just plummets. So your well is totally empty. And I get that. That well can't be filled by someone telling you that you need to stand and withstand touch. But the opposite can happen as well. So for people in that situation, it may be as simple as going to a care home, a residential home, helping out with places like hospitals, where as you start to integrate and you start to give, you're giving from a sense of control, but at the same time, levels of oxytocin go up. There are people in places who need some kind of gentle touch. The words are not important. The words can be soothing in nature. The words can be talking about the sky, the day, the trees, anything. But it's the touch that brings the power. And a lot of time we focus on the idea that I don't know what to say. But you know how to do. There are times when we're stressed. There are times when you're stressed and there's nobody around you to give you a hug. What the researchers have found now is self-hug works. Maybe not as great as having some other person present, but they found that people, when they ask them, they say, well, can you do an exercise where you've got to give a speech? And then they gave them different exercises to do and measured their cortisol level in their saliva. The ones who were given techniques like putting your hand on your heart, or just gently massaging it, or just gently rubbing your abdomen, these people found relief. They found a lowering of blood pressure. They found that they're able to think more clearly. Sometimes you see it when you people who are stressed, they start to rub the head. And self-touch does work in those circumstances. So it is possible to practice these things, or even sometimes we do it without being aware of it. These touches are so important. So in terms of your wellness dividend, the dividend that you give yourself for relieving stress includes touch. It includes the ability to get close to one another, to build community, to build resilience. All of these matter. If this has been helpful, if this has been useful to you, do tick the like button, subscribe, drop us a comment. We'd like to hear what is your reaction to this really intriguing topic.